Salman Soz, the recalibration on Russian oil comes after US imposed sanctions on Russian oil companies Rosneft and Lukoil. How is it surrender if oil companies now recalibrate their procurement from Russia, sir?
Gaurav, it is surrender, but it is also a very, very strange thing to see. India is not a small player in the world. India is a major economy, major country, major political force in the world. And we seem to be conducting our affairs in, to my mind, a non-strategic way. And it's almost like we're getting bullied by the American president. He seems to take great pleasure in trolling us. Every time something happens, he's the first one out of the gates to announce something, whether it happened during Operation Sindoor, and now he talked about how India was going to recalibrate our kind of energy strategy. And he's the one making these announcements. Meanwhile, our Prime Minister is quiet, and he hides behind diplomatic speak of the Ministry of External Affairs, which I think is very unfortunate. By the way, this whole idea that the Prime Minister would not go to ASEAN it's incredibly distressing. ASEAN is a big block of countries, almost 700 million people. They're a very important trade partner for us. This is an opportunity for India to push its advantage. China is going through a deflationary cycle.
I'll come to ASEAN in just a moment. May I keep it on oil for the first part of this debate? I'm coming to ASEAN and diplomacy in just a moment. Professor Ranganathan, US President Trump is announcing what government of India intends to do. Salman Soz says he's virtually trolling this government. Does this, as the Congress indicates, surrender? Does this indicate surrender, or does it make financial sense? Does it make financial sense to continue procurement of oil from Russia, even if these companies have been placed under sanctions, sir?
Good evening, Gaurav, and good evening to my fellow panelists. No, I disagree with my good friend Salman on 3 counts. Number 1, if it was surrender, then 2 months ago when Trump levied those awful tariffs, hypocritical tariffs as I call them, on account of us buying Russian oil, 25%, and demanded that India stop buying Russian oil. Since that time, we bought 130 million barrels of Russian oil. Would you call that surrender? No. We've kept the same amount of oil that we've been buying as a proportion of the total oil that we buy from Russia, around 38 to 40%. That is anything but surrender. Now, the fact is the rules of the games have been changed, and China and India are impacted most because there were no sanctions earlier on the oil companies. There was just a price cap. And look at the hypocrisy. The $60 per barrel ice cap, the cap was done, and the European countries were also evading it. You know, what kind of sanctions were they when the Europe and all those countries were buying more oil than even Russia was buying, and India was buying more energy than India was. Now, Trump has changed the rules of the game. Now, directly, there are sanctions for the first time on the 2 major Russian oil majors, as you said. Of course, it's going to impact India's purchase of Russian oil. It's also going to impact the world oil prices. Now, this is going to affect every country, including India. How is this a surrender? I refuse to accept this as a surrender.
Okay. Salman Soz, you want to quickly respond before I bring in Siddharth Zarabi and Ambassador Sajjanhar?
Yes. I wish on our show today we had a BJP spokesperson, that I could actually be a bit more forceful about things. I know.
To be fair, we tried. They chose not to come, and that's why we've got analysts, to face off with you, sir. Go on, sir.
Yes. Gaurav, that is why, let me explain why the BJP does not send its spokespersons on these kinds of shows where we're discussing some really tricky and prickly issues for the BJP. You know, you really have to think, Gaurav, you're a strategic analyst. I know that. If you think about how our oil purchases have gone, from less than 2% of our imports came from Russia before this war, and now it's about 40%. We took a lot of the oil that was coming from the Gulf. We let it, Gulf is a very important area for us. We reduced our imports from there to get oil from Russia. And suddenly, we have 40% coming from there. We did not think for a moment that if we have to take some Russian oil, maybe we go from 1 to 2% to maybe 20%. or 10%. But no, we went to 40%. And then we leave ourselves vulnerable to America. And as Anand was saying, we didn't do anything when Trump said something 2 months back. Of course, we're not going to do something immediately. But can he say that Trump is now, we won't have a trade deal now? I'm pretty sure we're going to have a trade deal because Trump is putting pressure on. We didn't have to be in this position. We left ourselves open to attack. And that is, and by the way, we when you negotiate with somebody like Trump, who's a bully, you cannot negotiate from a position of weakness. You have to demonstrate strength. That is what bullies understand. And by the way, India is a strong country of 1.4 billion people with the third largest economy. Come on. What is the BJP doing? Seriously, this is inexcusable.
Okay, Anand wants to respond before I bring in Ambassador Sajjanhar and Siddharth. Give me a moment. Go ahead, Professor Ranganathan.
No, of course, I'm absolutely sure and confident that my good friend Salman thinks of India's interest, even though he belongs to the Congress party. Would he not have wanted India to have saved $26 billion and kept our inflation in check on account of buying Russian oil instead of Saudi oil? Now, we are looking at our strategic and financial interest. Why shouldn't India have increased the purchase of Russian oil if it was cheaper and it was not flouting any sanctions? That makes absolute sense, Salman. Number two, I remember last time round, I didn't have enough time to rebut you when you said, look, our economy is in bad shape because FDI as a percentage of GDP has gone down. That, I'm afraid, even is a spurious comparison because that metrics is not allowed. The FDI has doubled in the last 10 years. From 45 to 85 billion dollars. The GDP has also increased robustly. So you cannot make that comparison. Let me give you a mathematical instance why you can't. If the FDI increases from 10 billion to 15 billion dollars, the GDP increases from 1 trillion to 2 trillion, the FDI as a percentage of GDP actually goes down. So please just congratulate India on doing well. You mean well. Please don't take the recourse of what
Fair
Congress
enough.
people.
Now let me bring in Siddharth Zarabi quickly into this conversation, and Salman, I'll come back to you to respond to this. Siddharth, India is caught in this Russia-US crossfire. They're the ones who are actually in the midst of this. US imposed sanctions on Lukoil and Rosneft. Now, does it make sense for India to continue to buy oil from Russia, either as a country or Reliance as a company, or Bharat Petroleum or Hindustan Petroleum or Indian Oil? Wouldn't that mean that we risk facing sanctions ourselves?
Gaurav, let's try and quickly understand the impact of these sanctions. And for context, I also want to compare them with earlier sanctions years ago on Iranian oil purchases. At that time also, Indian imports had come under question. There are fundamental differences between the two, and this sanction that has been imposed actually in some ways provides us an off-ramp because Russian oil purchases have become the main focal point for what is almost like a trade dispute between India and the United States. India hasn't backed down at all, and even now I think with the impact of these sanctions, the following two things will happen. If an entity in India, regardless of its ownership, were to be seen taking delivery of Russian oil, severe financial sanctions, including impact on global banking operations, will come into effect. And that is a risk that no company can afford in the current context. And since you mentioned several of those names, these are very, very large players. Therefore, there is a very significant sudden shock to other businesses that comes into play. So there is no choice really but to comply because the global financial system and all the levers attached to it are still directly under the impact and in control of the United States. That's very clear. Now, what is the consequence of this? Roughly 1/3 of our imports were coming from Russian sources. They have been tapering over the recent past few weeks and months. It's now clear that by the end of this year or spilling over into January or February of 2026, in 3 to 4 months' time, unless these sanctions are relaxed or removed, our Russian crude oil purchases will come down to near zero. There is no other way to look at it. What do we do, therefore? As a country, at the national level, ensuring energy supplies is critical, and therefore, I am sure that at the governmental level and at the company level, rapid adjustments to buy oil from other sources will come in. And one final point. Unlike during the Iranian oil sanction era, where India sought and got specific conditional relaxations, there is very little scope of any conditional relaxations with regard to Russian oil.
Fair enough. Let me bring in Ambassador Sajjanhar.
Just one point. I am told that even options of purchasing Venezuelan crude are limited at this stage. So I guess we will end up buying oil from other sources, and you are already seeing a spike in global crude oil prices, which may continue in the near term.
Which may be a disaster, which may set in adverse consequences if oil prices were to go up across the world or in different parts of the world, including in India. But Ambassador Sajjanhar, your reading of the Congress Party criticism, is this surrender on oil?
No, it is not a surrender at all, Gaurav. Thank you very much for having me on the show. You know, there are two aspects that we need to look at. Number one is energy security. The number two is pricing. So, what the government has said, in all its articulation on this subject is that we don't tell our companies to go and buy Russian oil. We tell them go and buy where you get oil the cheapest. And they were able to get the oil cheapest from there. So they have been able to buy from there. The second aspect is in terms of the sanctions that have come. It is not only that you purchase Rosneft and Lukoil and only that aspect will be sanctioned. Big companies, for instance, government companies, Reliance purchases about 50% of its oil from Rosneft. We purchase total of about 1.8, 1.9 million barrels oil a day. And Reliance has an agreement with Rosneft, 10-year agreement, 500,000 barrels of oil a day. Now, if it starts purchasing, Reliance has huge interest in the United States. It is going to get sanctioned. All its activities there are going to get sanctioned. The third point let me make here also is that, when there was sanctions put on Iranian oil in 2012, when it was the Barack Obama time, we were able to get a waiver for that because we said it's very important, 10 to 12% of our oil comes from Iran. So there was no problem. In 2018, when Mr. Trump levied sanctions on Iranian oil, there was no way out. We had to, now we don't import any oil at all from Iran. In Venezuela, when it came, last year we got some sort of a relaxation. So we started importing oil from Venezuela last year, Gaurav, except till April, because in April again, that waiver was taken off. The last point I make is, because of this, India has been importing. What are the sources of import of oil by India? There are 40 sources, there are 40 countries, companies from which we are importing. So, when it comes that we are not able to import oil from Rosneft and Lukoil, there are other sources. And the West Asian countries, whether it is Saudi Arabia, whether it is UAE, they have said that they are going to increase production so that if the production of Rosneft and Lukoil goes out of the international market, then they will be able to fill up that requirement. And I think India will definitely be able to. They will be able to moderate the prices.
So Salman Soz, when you look at the impact, it impacts the entire nation, goes way beyond domestic politics. Your reading, sir, of your party MP and leader Shashi Tharoor suggesting that President Trump should stop making these announcements for India. India does not make announcements for him. And why does the Congress party believe, the point that you were raising about staying away initially from Sharm el-Sheikh and now from ASEAN is running away from international diplomacy?
Well, it is running away from international diplomacy. But before I get to that point, let me just address Anand's earlier point on these prices and oil per se. ultimately he's not a politician, but this is about politics also. What are we doing this for? If you think about it, okay, we bought Russian oil. Assume for a moment that this is a totally economic decision. That means you're keeping oil prices low, good, but why is it not translating into lower pump prices then for people? In the last 6 years, the central government has collected 20 lakh crore rupees in fuel taxes. 20 lakh crores in excise taxes, right? So the question is, then what is happening to the citizens in whose name all of this is being done? Nothing, because you're in Delhi. I know what you pay for fuel taxes, your petrol prices, and that's how it's been for the last several years now. So that's one part of it. I won't talk about Anand's other part of FDI because that's not relevant for this discussion, but I will just say that he's wrong. I was talking about net FDI, not gross FDI. So that's maybe misunderstood. On this Sharma Sheikh, on ASEAN. Look, ASEAN is a big, important constituency for India.
Yes.
The point, I don't understand why the Prime Minister would not go there, why the Prime Minister would not go to the biggest flashpoint in the world, which was Gaza. That is where you show leadership. That is where you show India's traditional kind of, peacemaking abilities. So I think my sense is, I think people in India realize that the Prime Minister feels uncomfortable in President Trump's presence. If President Trump is trolling us, the way to respond to him is through a social media post and say, I'm sorry, President Trump, this is not the way it is. This is a reality. This is what India is doing. There's no harm in that. Be scared. Has India done something to America? Have we done something wrong to America? We have not. Why can't the Prime Minister, in a very gentle way, maybe push back? He can. He represents 1.4 billion people, but he's not doing a good job of representing us right now.
Okay. So on Sharm el-Sheikh, permit me to just raise this issue on this debate. So we saw President Trump, he was the center of attraction, and there were several heads of state, government, kings and princes who were all there, all behind him like hangers on. And you saw the way boot polish Shahbaz Sharif was there in Sharm el-Sheikh. Trump said, you want to come here? You want to say what you were telling me? The way you were praising me? Praise me in public. Would we want our Prime Minister, Professor Ranganathan, to be in that position? Would we want our Prime Minister to be Sharm el-Sheikh, if I may? And I'll come to ASEAN, specifically on ASEAN too, because that's a very, big point. But Sharm el-Sheikh first. And, would we want our Prime Minister of the fourth largest economy, hoping, soon to be third largest economy, 1.4 billion people, to be a hanger-on behind Trump?
No, absolutely. And I'm sure Salman, in his mind, understands this point very well. If it was Dr. Manmohan Singh instead of Prime Minister Modi, our self-respect comes first. Now, you look at what Trump has, the way he's been behaving with world leaders, not just at the so-called peace summit that dictated what Gaza would be. He was basically treating powerful leaders of powerful countries, more powerful than India, from European countries as kindergarten children. Hey, you come here. Hey, you speak this. Now, obviously, his whole tone and tenor is to humiliate other leaders. As you know what happened when those 8 leaders of EU countries visited the White House. They were standing there like kids. Now, I'm sure Salman doesn't want this to happen to our Prime Minister, irrespective of which party he belongs to. So, why give a bully a chance to, humiliate other people, especially when it creates an acrimonious attitude as far as diplomacy is concerned? The good ambassador out there would be able to, tell this in much more powerful way than I am to Salman, but I'm sure Salman realizes this. As to the other point that Salman made, I'm at the risk of repeating myself. Salman also knows this. This is the problem with my dear friend Salman.
I come to the FDI debate since it's not central to our issue
not
today.
Not the FDI, but why the petroleum prices have not been lowered. Just to give 30 seconds to that, Salman knows this sector has been used as a cash cow. all the welfare schemes that total much more than what the government has saved through the petroleum prices have been used for other welfare schemes, millions, hundreds of millions of toilets and gas connections and Ujjwala schemes and Ayushman Bharat. Salman knows this. I mean, half the bridges in Kashmir and roadways and highways and schools and colleges have been built on the money that the government leeches off the petroleum sector. So for him to say, why is not reflecting at the pump? He knows it inside. The problem with politicians, good friends like Salman, is they know the truth inside, but they never utter it like Trump does.
Okay, I have to bring Ambassador Sajjanhar, but Salman, since you raised your hand and since you were named, please respond, sir.
Just on two things. Just on this oil part, you know, this is not the first time oil prices in the world have been higher. And by the way, this is not the only government that has done welfare politics, right? I mean, even the Manmohan Singh government had a huge, welfare kind of program. So this is not new. So this cannot be an excuse. As far as the Prime Minister not going to these events, and should we put him in a position where he might be humiliated by Trump? I think that is exactly what surrender looks like. You know, he's not a minor player. He's not a bit player in international politics, because it's not about Narendra Modi. This is about India. And, you know, maybe he doesn't go to this place. Okay, fine. He didn't want to go to Gaza. That's fine. But ASEAN is a very different. There's an ASEAN-India summit happening.
Yes.
How can you not be present for the ASEAN-India summit? That is what how can you let Trump dictate everything about where you're going to go? You cannot do that. You should have enough confidence in yourself.
Fair enough. Ambassador Sajjanhar, you want to respond to this?
You know, Gaurav, you know, India was Sharm el-Sheikh once in 2009 when we accepted that Balochistan should be included in our conversation with Pakistan. You see what happened in Sharm el-Sheikh this time. It was a victory lap for Donald Trump. Do we want to be the cheerleaders for Donald Trump? We don't. You know, I will tell Mr. Salman Soz, I remember I was in service. You know, India had not joined the SCO. Dr. Manmohan Singh said, I am not going to be attending any of these meetings of SCO as an observer, because I don't have the time to go and sip a cup of coffee with all these people. It would have meant exactly that, you know, sipping a cup of coffee with no purpose in mind and just sort of, you know, cheerleading Mr. Trump. So, you know, I think it was a very wise decision. It was a very dignified decision to send one of our ministers of state, because, you know, if that was the case, you know, you could have said, okay, send the external affairs minister. I think it was not worth the while of even the external affairs minister. I don't mean any disrespect to Mr. The minister of state who went. He's good, but, you know, it had a representation. Now, as far as ASEAN is concerned, ASEAN is a very important this thing, but it is not the only platform where we interact with ASEAN. There are many other platforms. You know, they keep coming, the individual leaders bilaterally, they keep coming to India. India keeps going to them. This is not the only place where we would meet. You know, one more thing is, it is always said discretion is the better part of valor. And let's face that. And I think it is, we know that Mr. Trump is very erratic. You would recall that in 2019, Gaurav, when Trump was meeting Imran Khan in White House Oval Office, he said, I'm willing to mediate on Kashmir. And Mr. Modi has asked me to mediate on Kashmir. You know, he is totally unpredictable. He is, what he thinks and what he says, you have no control over it. What is important today is my relations with the United States. They are very, strategic, comprehensive, global partnership. I need to preserve that. And in that, the trade relationship is a very important element. It's moving well. You know, the negotiators have been going up and down. They have been traveling. They have made a lot of progress there. I think let that be over. There will be very many opportunities. You know, there's G20 coming in South Africa. There are so many international meetings that are coming up. There'll be very many meetings that will be.
But the current situation that our country is facing, and will oil prices now go through the roof? Siddharth Zarabi, how is India diversifying purchases? What will be the overall impact on global prices and on the Indian consumer?
Well, lots to unpack in that question, but please remember there is a 30-day grace period.
Yes.
So in effect, the stoppage will come into effect after that period. Inbound tankers carrying Russian crude are not being stopped in high seas. But there is a broader impact that will go beyond oil prices. Remember, pump prices of petrol, diesel have remained frozen and static for almost 3 years now. And I expect that to continue. As has been pointed out, upswings or downswings, there is a net effect that has not been passed on to the consumer. And the consumer in India is perhaps getting compensated in a higher manner through the increased subsidy bill, which is at its highest point, not just the center, in fact, states as well. And one final point that we need to keep in mind, let's connect it back to the ongoing trade conversation with the United States. We've heard Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal speaking at Berlin, reiterating that trade is not just about a particular deal or a pact, it's about how two countries do business with each other, how they treat each other. I expect that the next 30 days also, with this sanction and the alternative supply arrangements that will be driven at the company level, it would mean that there is scope for perhaps coming to an agreement.
Okay.
But does this clearly indicate that the path has been smoothened for the trade deal? From the Indian point of view, Gaurav, remember, it was never about some quantity of crude oil or a percentage. It is about reciprocity and the way you treat the country. And I don't see that stance being diluted or being changed. The country will remain firm in dealing with the United States in the way that it wants to.
Okay. Salman Soz, so what the Congress describes as surrender is perhaps being analyzed as smart strategy. India took advantage of the discounted Russian oil till whatever time it was possible, and now that sanctions are in place, India is looking for plan B. But you believe, or does the Congress party believe, that this is letting a comprehensive strategic partner, Russia, down? You think Russia will not understand this?
Well, look, you delve in strategy. Buying Russian oil at that time was not strategic, it was opportunistic. So let's not call that strategy. If it was strategy, then we would have been thinking multiple, years ahead and see how it might unfold, given what was going on in the world, even at that time. So I think that was not strategy. We were not ready. We have not been ready. We've been kind of, I don't know what's happened to our Ministry of External Affairs. We have not been ready. I think we've been found wanting. As far as, people may disagree with this, but I think by not, I can understand we didn't go for the Gaza conference. Okay, fine. But not going to ASEAN, I think that is a bad look for the country. That is not a good look for anybody who's going for major negotiations on trade with a bully. The best way to deal with a bully typically is that you kind of stand up to the bully. Now, you don't want to stand up to a bully who's really much stronger than you and get a broken nose, but want to show. You want to show that you have a
both
backbone.
Professor Ranganathan and Siddharth have their hand up. But go on, sir, complete your point. I'll come to both my guests in just a moment.
I think optics in this case matter. And, the Prime Minister is a master of optics because that's what he's given this country for a long, long time. The least he could have done is just shown a little more backbone so that President Trump understands that this is not a guy who's just going to cave. I hope he doesn't cave. For the country's sake. I hope he doesn't. But it doesn't. I mean, ASEAN was a missed opportunity. I think the Prime Minister was not well advised on this.
Okay, Siddharth, you want to quickly go first? Then
I'll be very honest. The real agenda, if at all, for India and its leader to visit the ASEAN should be to seek a comprehensive review of the India-ASEAN FTA that was signed in 2009. Has proven to be detrimental to Indian companies, small, medium-sized, large companies. It's a backdoor for Chinese goods to come into India. It's one of the worst deals that have happened as far as our trade policy is concerned. Personally, I would only look forward to a visit if the main agenda was to review that deal and make it more equitable for hundreds of millions of people in India.
Fair enough. Professor Ranganathan, you wanted to come in, also come in on that additional point. Will Russia not understand what India is going through now? Will Russia feel let down if India were not to take oil from these two Russian companies once they've been sanctioned?
No, Russia won't, and Putin has already said it, if not in so many words, because China is also in the same boat. But a couple of points out here. Number one, the fact remains that during COVID also people were working and conducting businesses online. So for Salman to put so much emphasis on physical presence of Modi is surprising. Having said that, it was Congress that was berating Modi for going abroad just 2 weeks ago, saying कि Prime Minister घर पे इतना काम है और आप बाहर बार-बार क्यों घूम रहे हैं? अब उल्टा हो गया. But finally, that wonderful frame, spectacle frame that Salman is wearing, Gaurav, that is Tom Ford's 50,000 rupees. What would you say if he were to buy that instead of 50,000 rupees but 75,000 rupees? Wouldn't you say that is foolish? So if we are getting oil for less from Russia, why wouldn't we buy it? Same goes for Salman's Tom Ford specs.
Okay. Salman, about your specs in 10 seconds.
Honestly, I don't know if these are Tom Ford specs. If they are, then I must be doing well. So I have no idea. Honestly, I don't. But I do think, on a more serious note, that this online business and all that, it's not. Honestly, let's put a hand on your hearts. This is not a good look. And by the way, if we have to do something, if there's a problem, as Siddharth says, on the trade deal with the ASEAN, right? That is the time to push it. We got to push it. Now, President Trump is going to meet Xi Jinping at the APEC conference after this. He's not going to be at ASEAN. And maybe there was an opportunity for him to actually engage with him bilaterally on the sidelines, maybe quietly. But I think, I think it's a missed opportunity. It doesn't, and by the way, it doesn't look good for India. It doesn't look good for us.
Okay. Let me also bring in Ambassador Sajjanhar on the Russia point for a moment. You've been to Russia so many times. You've interacted with them so many times here and there. I want to understand from you. India sought CAATSA waiver to buy the S-400 system despite sanctions. And India pushed back on that. Now, India is seeking additional air defense systems. But will India be letting Russia down if post-sanctions India does not take oil from these two Russian companies?
No, I don't think so. I think Russia is mature enough and it knows what is happening around the world. We have a special privileged strategic partnership. Putin is going to be in India in another month and a half's time, and our relationship continues to be very robust and very strong. I don't think there is going to be exchange of Jaishankar is going to be in Moscow, Lavrov is going to be coming here, NSAs are going to be exchanged. I don't think that is going to be any problem. I think let's also face it. India has not caved into anything that Mr. Trump has said. If India had caved in, we would have been able to get this agreement in beginning of July. From our point of view, it was ready. But as far as Mr. Trump wanted, he wanted things on GMO, he wanted things on textiles, he wanted things on, what he had been able to get from the whole world, from EU, from Japan, from South Korea, from Vietnam, from Indonesia, everyone, UK, that free market access, zero tariffs on American products, and there were 15 or 20% tariffs on these products coming. India did not succumb to that. I think that is another aspect that has really, been rankling Mr. Trump, that he wants to go, chest thumping that I have been able to open this market. India has not given him that pleasure. So, India has...
That's something, you mentioned that today. That's exactly what Ian Bremmer has also said, that countries like India and China are not succumbing to US pressure. And we had played out what Ian Bremmer said yesterday on India First. I've run out of time on this part of the show. I want to thank all our guests for this stellar discussion that we've had on the current situation and how it continues to unfold.